side, ref!
Welcome back to In From The Side. Another week, another show. We are continuing our series of selecting our Mount Rushmore of rugby players across every single position, across all eras in the history of rugby. With me, my co-host, Matthew Rhodes. Matt, good to see you, bud.
Thanks, buddy. Good to see you too.
Yeah, not too bad. Are we ready for this? That's the big question.
That is the question of the day. It's been a very interesting week trying to put this together. A few technical issues that I've had to stumble over to get here, but it should be a good show nonetheless.
Yeah, it'll be a great show. We got some good feedback and a lot of interaction from the folks out there in YouTube land and on social media. Thank you so much for all of your recommendations, sharing your thoughts, naming your Mount Rushmore of players. And the concept really is, if you have a mountain and you have to select and chisel 4 faces on the side of that mountain for each position in a rugby team, who would those players be? Last week we did the fullbacks. Go and check out the video in our video section. Today we are selecting right wings. And I think the biggest challenge here was remembering who played left and who played right. And a lot of the times, a lot of these players that we have on the list could play left and right wing. So I think it's fair to say, Matt, that between these 2 Mount Rushmores that we're going to pick, a lot of these players can either be in the left or right selection. We know that wings are often interchangeable.
Yeah, there were a lot of great wings, that played on the left, that played on the right. We're doing the right wing today, and I think my biggest challenge in the week was identifying who was an out-and-out right wing versus who was someone who maybe played both sides or was more left than right.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's see if we're right.
No pun.
No pun intended. We'll wing it. Matt, who's the first name on your list? Who's the first face on the side of that Mount Rushmore?
So one of the things I want to say is I went backwards and forwards on, as I always do, stats, players, like person played right wing, number of tries, number of appearances. And at one stage, I had a complete Hail Mary list put together. But what I did is I scrapped it altogether. And I started with the wings that I watched growing up and have watched over the last few years that really, whenever they touched the ball, I got excited. And they inspired a lot of excitement in me when they were on the field and playing for their respective teams. So first on my list was Goldie. So I went with Jeff Wilson, 44 tries and 60 appearances, mainly on the right, but he also played fullback and once or twice on the left as well. But he's just the outstanding character for me from a playing career. He's also a dual national in terms of playing for the All Blacks and then also playing for in New Zealand in the cricket, and he's a handy basketball player as well. So the complete sportsman all round. But I thought at wing he really deserves a spot up on my mountain.
I totally agree with you, and he also made my list.
Good.
Again, we grew up in the same era, we're the same age. Jeff Wilson in the 90s was a thorn in every South African team's side in Super Rugby and whenever the All Blacks played against the Springboks.
Not just the South African teams, though. He was great. He was a thorn in everyone's side.
Yeah, but as South African supporters, we
Correct.
Specifically, I mean, I talk about this often. We've got this ridiculous stat that we are proud of, that Jonah Lomu never scored against the Springboks. How many tries did Jeff Wilson score against the Springboks? He loved scoring against us. Some notable tries that he scored against South Africa. In the second test at Loftus in 1996, it was the series clincher. If they won that test, they won the series, first time ever, the only All Black team to ever win a series in South Africa. He scored a double. So he was fantastic.
With his golden locks, without his golden locks, before cricket, after cricket, he was amazing.
I remember him making his debut in 1993, scoring a double against Scotland in a big win that the All Blacks scored. I think it was 19 at the time, came on the scene, sort of went away in 94. John Kirwan came back into the mix. And then 95, again, he was part of that World Cup team on fire. But for more than a decade, like you say, Jeff Wilson was top of the pile.
Yeah.
I loved everything he did. When we spoke about the fullbacks, you mentioned Christian Cullen was a great exponent of the chip and chase. Likewise, Jeff Wilson, he loved a good chip and chase, and he was brilliant. Did it at pace, could hit the line. He was I mean, not a big guy, but he was strong.
Yeah.
Like, he broke a lot of tackles. If you watch a lot of the tries he scored for Otago, it's very physical. I love it. I totally second that name on Mount Rushmore.
Nice one.
Jeff Wilson's up there, definitely.
We'll chisel him with hair up in the golden locks.
Yeah, you'll see the photo that I've used to get him on there. He still has all his beautiful locks.
Good on you.
And they look good.
Good on you, Goldie.
Yeah, Goldie, happy with that. Happy
Yeah,
with
nice.
that. Okay.
Who'd you go second?
Another All Black for me. And I think this is the thing, right? New Zealand's produced so many good wings over the years. But again, growing up, this guy was just revered. He's the guy that handed over the right wing jersey to Jeff Wilson, and it's got to be John Kirwan for me.
Okay.
Growing up in the 80s, I mean, South Africa was in rugby isolation. We hardly ever played international rugby. And you just heard about these mythical All Blacks, right? And in 1986, the New Zealanders toured South Africa as individuals. They came as the Cavaliers. John Kirwan famously decided not to come for personal reasons. And we got glimpses of him in 87. I think that's when South Africans really took note of him. That try he scored against Italy from the kickoff, ran the distance of the field to bring up 50 points for the first time ever for New Zealand in a test. Again, pace, power, deceptively quick for a big guy, could break tackles. I would be very surprised if anyone challenges this out there in YouTube land. Like, I think he's well respected, well loved. Maybe not the greatest coach, and maybe he gets under people's skin as a pundit. I know he does get under my skin every now and again, but as a player, he was sublime. I absolutely love John Kirwan. Scored some great tries. Loved scoring against Australia as well, the old enemy. He scored a lot of tries against Australia in the Bledisloe Cup.
Yeah.
Loved him.
Nice, bro. You won't get any pushback from me. He was a great player. I don't have him on my mountain, unfortunately.
That's okay. It's your list, mate.
You mentioned he loved scoring against Australia, and on my team, or on my four, I went with an Aussie, and that's David Campese. Campo. So I think he played on both sides a couple of times, but and I think confusingly he played with 11 on his back, but he played right wing.
He famously wore the number 11, but he did play right wing.
Yeah.
For the majority of his career.
Which, can I just say, was confusing when putting this together. But nonetheless, Campo is up on my Mount Rushmore. 64 tries, 101 appearances. The step, the goose step, the talent, he had everything. And when I was growing up, just similar to how you described John Kirwan there, David Campese was that for me. Obviously, I grew up in Zim, and we didn't have a lot of access to watching internationals. As I said before, we'd have to go around to someone's house who'd have like a NASA-styled satellite dish, and if there was any rain or any kind of cloud in the air, it'd be interference in the transmission. But when we did get to see any kind of internationals play, there was such a hype and a fever and an excitement around David Campese. And every time he touched the ball, again, coming back to the kind of framework of how I put this list together, I was excited. I was like feverish, foaming at the mouth every time he touched the ball, because you knew he was going to do something with it. He was dynamic, exciting. He'd run, come in off the wing. And again, he was very, very difficult to bring down and scored some amazing tries.
He did score amazing tries, and he scored a boatload. I think he scored 64 tries.
64 tries and 101 appearances. Yeah.
Absolutely unbelievable. So he scored 2 tries in every 3 tests that he played.
Yeah.
That's not a bad return. And back in those days, they hardly ever played against a Italy or a Uruguay, he played against the All Blacks, England, South Africa, right? He played proper tests. So that is an unbelievable strike rate. You'd be happy to hear that he's the third face on my Mount Rushmore.
Oh, really?
So
that's good.
I also picked Campo. So
Nice.
yeah, I'll back you up on that one. Absolute legend of the game. I think, again, growing up in the 80s, we only ever saw glimpses of these players in South Africa play international rugby, but we did see them play. Campo famously scored his 50th test try against South Africa in 92 at Newlands. So again, there's a bit of a South African connection. But if you ever want to understand how good David Campese was, listen to Bill McLaren commentate on him playing. It was just the poetry coming out of Bill McLaren's voice. And he rated Campo as one of his best players that he's ever seen. And he's seen some players play over half a century. So that's high praise. But Campo, obviously famous for the goose step, try-scoring machine. Wasn't great on defense, Famously, Peter Hendricks ran around him in 95, and he did make the odd fumble, like that weird pass he did in 89 against the Lions that pretty much cost him the series. But apart from that, I mean, he played to his strengths. We said this about Cullen last week. He wasn't a defender. He was an attacking player. That's what his mindset was, is attack at all costs. So he would always try something and be a bit of a maverick in the back line. You never knew what you were going to get with Campo, but he was always exciting. The moment he touched the ball, you almost expected something to happen. He got under the skin a lot against opposition teams. Like whenever the All Blacks did the haka, he would stand at the end of the field kicking the ball to himself. Like he paid no attention to the haka. Didn't really, show a lot of respect for it, but that's just how he prepared himself for a test. And then famously in that World Cup final in 91, where he was player of the tournament, he slapped down a ball. England were on the counter-attack. He just slapped down the ball. And in those days, there were no professional fouls, but he stopped a clear potential try from being scored, and Australia won by 1 score. So, but that 91 World Cup, he was brilliant. Like the types of tries he scored against Ireland specifically, we just cut into the line, running straight. He's just someone that ran straight with pace. And then you add that little goose step just to jinx on the outside. He was brilliant.
Yep.
I absolutely loved Campo. Legend.
I did too, mate. He was outstanding, and as I say, whenever he was on TV, or whenever there was a game that I knew Australia were playing and he'd been selected, I was exciting. And then you think back to in your childhood, playing in the garden, growing up, playing barefoot with your mates, touch. You were calling yourself Campo. You were doing goosies. You were doing side steps. You were trying things that you'd seen on TV that he was showing the world could be done. So for me, he had to go up there.
No, absolutely. For me, he's a dead certainty on Mount Rushmore.
Nice.
On the right wing. Okay, who's your third guy on the side of that?
So
mountain?
I've gone 2 oldies. They won't appreciate me calling them oldies because they're still kicking about. Jeff Wilson and David Campese, obviously. But my next 2, I've looked in more recent times.
Yeah.
And again, using the same framework, whenever I see this player play, and again, I think I might get some stick for these next 2, but I don't care because this is my Mount Rushmore. Let me hear yours. Whenever I see this person play on the wing, whenever he gets the ball, he's going to do something with it. He's dynamic, he's exciting, he scores tries left and right. He's got defenders scared every single time, and he does something with it, and it's going to be Cheslin Kolbe. So right. Chesy gets my nod to go third time, or the third pick up on Mount Rushmore.
Can't really fault you, mate. I think it's always tricky when we have these types of discussions and you talk about current players because they're not done yet, right? They still have so much more to do in their careers. But if you look at Cheslin already, I mean, double World Cup winner, that try he scored in 2019, his performances in 2023, recently named SA Rugby Player of the Year for 2024. He had a fantastic season last year. Like he's on top form.
He's playing form.
He's playing the best rugby of his career.
And
currently.
we talked about it before. He kind of was given his shot late as well.
Yeah, he only made his debut at 25, I think.
So maybe his appearances. So look, he's played both. He's done right wing, I think 42% of the time, left wing 28% of the time. 18 tries and 39 appearances is a good return. He's also played fullback. He's also played scrum off sometimes. He plays, I think, fly off a couple of times for Toulon.
Throws the ball in at the line out.
Throws the ball in at the line out a couple of times in hooker. But where he's the most dynamic, I think, is at wing. Yeah. And every time Chesy gets the ball, I get goosebumps. And again, talking about Jeff Wilson or David Campese, it was the same. And so for Chesy, he's still going strong, as you say. He's just been named SA Player of the Year, and he's still definitely got gas in the tank. So again, we're calling it maybe a little bit early, but for me, I think already what he's done is deserving of going up on that mountain, and he'll always be one of my favorites of all time.
No, absolutely, he's one of my favorites as well. And I had him on my shortlist. I didn't pick him though, but it's interesting. I think in the Northern Hemisphere, here in the UK, I think people will agree with you. I think down south, a couple of people, especially in South Africa, people might not think he's the GOAT. TNT Sports does this series on social media, I don't know if you've seen it, where they ask ex-players, who's the greatest player from England, who's the greatest player? They have to give one name. And a couple of times I saw guys mention Cheslin Kolbe, just naming him as the greatest player South Africa's ever produced. So Maybe it's recency bias because he is still playing, but you can't take anything away from what he's achieved, mate. And the types of tries that he scores is usually tries that most wingers, they can't do what he does. He's electric off the mark, so quick off the mark. I think that gives him the edge.
Yeah.
And for a small guy, he tackles like a machine.
He's solid, dude. He runs into, I think, if I remember correctly, he ran into Barrett going to tackle him. Barrett's like twice the size of him, and
he bumped him.
He bumped him
down.
down.
He bumped him. He's done that a couple of times. He's bumped some props and locks, just because he comes at you at the rate of knots, and he just hits you at
solid
at pace.
He's a literally a tank, a missile. He just, for someone so small and dynamic and fast, he's just muscle. Top to toe. So look, again, might be called out on that, and it might be a bit of bias, but
doesn't matter
in terms of the way I feel every time Chesy touches the ball, he'll go down as one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, round out your list because I want to spend some time on my number 4.
That's fine. So
who's your 4th player up?
Staying with the same type of framework again. I think one of the things I really struggled with this last pick. There were so many. There's so many great names, and I had Joe Rokocoko in there at one stage. 46 tries and 68 appearances. Fantastic. Again, you mentioned Kiwis have got a list as long as their arm of great wingers. Dougie Howlett, 49 tries and 62 caps. Mm-hmm. There's a few others. Ben Smith, outstanding. He played a lot at fullback.
What a player!
But what a player on wing. Nenamilda Skada. From South Africa as well, people like James Small and JP Peterson.
Legends, both of them.
Absolutely loved. James Small was like, again, in that 1995 World Cup and around that time, just sensational. And JP Peterson, he made my South African all-time great because I just loved him. A great shark, great wing, just great player. And then, again, going with my heart, Tonderai Chavanga, played schoolboy rugby with him. Ended up playing for the Springboks, holds the world record for the amount of tries scored in the game. One of the fastest men in world rugby. He was in my considerations as well. So, I was going backwards and forwards. But I think looking at the current set of players, there's one that stands out that I think, again, might be early in his career to call him a greatest of all time. But Will Jordan, he's got 38 tries and 41 appearances. Like
that alone, mate. That alone puts him up there.
It just is an unbelievable return you put him against all those other names that I just said and the types of longevity that they had or the tries they scored, and he's just the most, in my opinion, the most dynamic finisher. Every time, and he's just come back off an injury the last year or so, but every time he's on the field, whether he's playing for the Crusaders or he's playing for the All Blacks, whether he's playing wing or at fullback, he's so dynamic, he's so dangerous, and he scores tries left, right, and Chelsea. So I think even though he's got a long way to go, for me, again, he falls into that category. Jeff Wilson, David Campese, Cheslin Kolbe, Will Jordan. Every time he gets the ball, I'm just frothing at the mouth. So for me, it was a hard pick over the others because, again, they're ex-players and past now, and so they're done with their careers, and maybe you think their time is done. But I think his stats against their stats, he's done more in a shorter period of time. And if he stays fit for longer, he's going to be an all-time great without a doubt.
No, that I totally agree with you, and I have no issue with that because I picked my 4th player on the list, had a shorter career and played less tests. So it really depends on who made an impression on you. These lists are subjective. It's not backed by stats. It's not backed by anything. It's your opinion. And Will Jordan's amazing. A lot of people will think that fullback's his best position, but because Bodie and D-Mac has been playing there, obviously he played a lot of rugby on the wing. And just scored so many tries. Try scored against Ireland in the quarterfinal. That just broke the Irish. That for me was like the catalyst to actually get New Zealand to win that game. Like he scores tries in crucial moments, creates tries out of nothing. Scored a lot of tries against South Africa already in his short career. Like when he touches the ball, like you say, things tend to happen. I think your mates in New Zealand will agree with you on this. There might be a couple of other guys like Howlett and Rokocoko and Ben Smith, but in terms of talent and impact, you can't really fault that pick. Will Jordan's amazing.
And Will Jordan's amazing. I think the old heads, a few mates of mine, are going to be saying, how can you pick Will Jordan over John Kirwan, given what John Kirwan did? And you have him in your squad. But I never got the kind of warm, fuzzy feeling watching John Kirwan.
You didn't have the exposure to him
exactly
that you did with Will Jordan. I did. I did watch John Kirwan growing up. So it really depends on, I keep saying this, it's like who made an impression on you as a lighty or later on.
Look, you could go stats left and right. There's a claim or an argument to be made that Daisaku Ohata, who plays for or played for Japan, should be on the list because 69 tries, number one all time in the top 50 try scorers, the only one entire group to have a positive ratio of more tries than games played. And then another one that was on my list at one point was Kaki Tabodzadze from Georgia, 50 tries and 51 appearances. But you come back to the point, who have they played and what kind of quality and talents have they come up against? If you look at the likes of Jeff Wilson, David Campese, Cheslin Kolbe, and also Will Jordan, they're playing at the highest level against the best opposition.
So I've already sort of picked my Mount Rushmore for all the positions that we're going to do over the next couple of seasons, right? So I think it's really difficult to pick, in any of these positions, to pick a player outside of the Six Nations and the Rugby Championship teams. Like those 10 teams, that's where your majority of players will come from. I can think of one exception on the left wing. We're going to talk about him next week. But it's very difficult, mate, because they don't play top-tier teams all that often. If they scored that many tries against the All Blacks, Australia, England, South Africa...
Fair enough.
Different story, but like Ohata scored tries against Hong Kong and Malaysia and... In
Singapore.
World Cup Singapore,
yeah.
I mean, it's...
So there's going to be people out there that are going to shout that name, but the reality is...
I think you're fine.
I think these boys that we've got on our mountain stand up.
Yeah.
So that sort of draws my mountain to a conclusion. Who do you have as your number 4?
I like your Mount Rushmore. Again, we're picking players that made the biggest impression on us. And for me, growing up in the 80s, there were 2 video cassettes that my dad had, Tryline Tales and Tryline Tales 2, mate. And that featured this guy. He's from your neck of the woods. Springbok legend. He only played 18 tests, scored 12 tries, scored a hat-trick against the All Blacks in 1981. It has to be Ray Mordt.
Nice.
Ray Mordt's on my list. Like I'm getting goosebumps now just thinking about him. Him playing alongside Karel du Plessis, Naas Botha, Donnie Gerber in the 80s. There was no bigger group of legends for me growing up. These guys were my superheroes, and no wing in South Africa in that time made a bigger impression on me. Him together with Kirwan in the 80s were just formidable. And again, we talk about players making an impact. The types of tries that Ray Mordt scored. He often had 2-3 players on his back. He carried them across the line. He was so quick. Like he had a lot of pace for a big guy. He was muscular. He was physical. He could run over players. He could run around players. I can go on all day. I think the folks in South Africa will definitely agree with me on this. I think a lot of people that know their history and saw him play will say absolutely Ray Mordt's got to be up there. I think for the international viewers, they might scratch their head and say, Ray, who? You know, we don't know this guy because he played during the isolation years in the 80s. He only played 18 tests. I think it's a travesty that he didn't get an opportunity to play more on the international stage. He went on to play rugby league at Wigan, took up the money offer and made a bit of money out of rugby. But he will forever in South African rugby go down as one of the greatest wings of all time. Scored some fantastic tries, and I just loved him growing up.
Yeah, I mean, growing up in Zim, obviously Ray Mordt has legendary status. I grew up knowing his Butts and Hawken and Anna, and their kids. They were friends of my uncle and aunt. But again, the name Ray Mordt is synonymous with Springboks and skill and capability and tries, and just again those kind of that folklore around a person and personality was everywhere. Yeah. So again, no pushback from me on that call, but tough to bring in a name like that with only 18 appearances for the Springboks. But
for me, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
For me, there were a lot of contributing factors to why he only played 18 tests. It's the same with Gerber. It's the same with Botha. These guys should have played 100, but they never got the opportunity. And that doesn't take away from what they could do on the field.
And the
like
skill
he
set.
was one of the best wings I've ever seen play, and it still is to this day. And if you see him lately, he's still in shape, mate. He can still probably do one or two things on the field. But
Nice.
it was difficult to select these 4 players. I mean, just quickly before we wrap up, on my list I had Izzy Folau, Jason Robinson. There was a guy that played for France who I really loved, Jean-Baptiste Lafond. He was fantastic, loved him. Emile Ntamak, another Frenchman, Roger Bougarel from the 60s and 70s. He was really great. Simon Gagan, we spoke about before.
One of my favorites of all time.
What a legend on the right wing for Ireland. I really loved him. Dougie Howlett, Joe Rokothoko. I had Cheslin on. Welsh wingers, Ian Evans, Gerald Davies, all in with a shout. Fantastic players, fantastic Lions. Ben Tune, I had on my list. Rougerie from France. Brian Lima, he was good.
Great shot.
The chiropractor. JP Peterson, James Small. Jannie Engelbrecht played for South Africa in the 60s. He was a legend. George North. There's so many. There's so many to pick from. But I think we've settled on 2 decent lists.
Yeah, George North was in my considerations at one point as well. Again, just an absolute beast. And again, the longevity. But I think, given time, Will Jordan will outplay him. And so that's why he goes and gets the nod. It was between him and George North for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So that is our Mount Rushmore of right wings. Join the conversation. Leave your comments in the comment section below. Before you do that, give us a like, give us a subscribe. Click the little notification button at the bottom of the screen. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the social medias. We'd love to hear from you. Please tell us who you think the best right wings of all times were. Give us your thoughts. We'll do this again next week. We're going to go over to the left wing, and Matt, we'll be better prepared next week.
We've got a whole raft of left wingers to choose from.
There's a lot more.
There's a lot more left wingers to choose from. To be fair, there were a lot of right wingers too. I think just identifying who's an out and out right winger was a bit tough for me. But next week it should be better. Feel free to bring us all your comments, all the stick. Tell us why my choices were crazy and who you'd have in your Mount Rushmore picks instead. But mate, this was fun.
This was fun. We'll do it again next week.
Thanks, buddy.
Cheers, buddy. See you again. Cheers.